Well, that's one way of starting, isn't it? To make sure that you don't understand me or do understand me. You know what? You're brilliant. You can understand me. That's one thing I have learned in 30 years of brain research is that you are actually humans. We are phenomenally brilliant. And we don't always realize it. And we've been we haven't had the correct kind of messaging when it comes to understanding how well we function. So I'm in a very privileged position where I go, globally around the world, teaching people about the mind-brain connection. And I still do clinical trials. My background is I'm a clinical therapist. I practiced for 25 years in South Africa. I worked in the apartheid transition and post-apartheid era, 3 days a week in the most shocking conditions, in the most terrible areas of Africa, working through the traumas, the terrible things that had happened, helping people. We'd go into community centers and schools, and thousands of people would turn up, and we would spend hours teaching them how to think and how to learn and how to manage emotions. And I saw so much resilience in humanity in those 25 years. It really made me see what we're made of. And it really spurred a lot of my research that has been ongoing. I also, parallel to that, ran a practice for people that were privileged enough to be able to come to a private practice. I also worked in a lot of schools. I worked at a tremendous amount of work in government, corporate. So I've seen this whole mind-brain humanity thing from many different angles and for many different years. I still continue to do research. I work with a team of scientists and neurosurgeons and neurologists and psychiatrists, top ones in the world. You can actually go and see my work, drleafresearch.com, and you can see my advisory board. We have people from Mayo Clinic and from Cleveland Clinic and top psychiatrists that are actually part of our teams. And what we do is clinical trials looking at how, when you use your mind correctly, how this can influence your neurophysiology, which is your brain function, and your physiology, which is your body, and most importantly of all, your mental well-being. My main focus is helping people understand mental health and understanding the correct narrative of mental health, because our current narrative of mental health is kind of scary. We're told a lot of scary stuff, and when you are driven by fear, you live in an environment of fear, you actually literally bathe yourselves in fear, and that can have a tremendously negative impact on how you function. And we see this in the statistics where the highest rate of death amongst 18 and 19-year-olds is suicide. In the United States, the fourth highest cause of death amongst 8-year-olds in the United States is suicide. I mean, these are insane statistics. We're getting told all kinds of scary things about how mental illness is on the rise, and there's just a lot of fear-mongering going on. Now, I'm not denying the fact that the suicide statistics exist. Those are very true. But we have to understand, is mental illness really on the rise? Is it actually mental illness? What are we talking about here? What is mental health? What is mental illness? Is it right to compare mental illness to something like cancer, which it has been compared to? Have we maybe got things a little bit wrong? And I say yes to all those questions. We do have things wrong. We've been kind of going in the wrong direction for 60 years now. About 60 years ago, we had a change in how we were approaching humanity. Before that, prior to that, humans were seen as having a spiritual nature as well as a physical nature. And that spiritual nature we talk about in science as being the non-physical, and then the brain and body being the physical. And then there was a tremendous emphasis about 60 years ago on the physical only. And so the way that humans were seen were as being very physical, almost like biological automatons. And this influenced how we manage our minds. And so we began an era 60 years ago which really started peaking around 30 years ago, and it's hit at an all-time low, a dangerous low in recent years, where we are mismanaging our minds. So the narrative that I'm going to present to you over tonight and tomorrow morning, it's kind of a 3-part series, is to talk about a more hopeful narrative about humanity, about mental health, about what it is, and about how much power you actually have over your mind, and how do we cope with the events and circumstances of life that we cannot control, like politics and socioeconomic situations and traumas and war and all these things that happen around us. What is our capacity as humans to cope within this? Is this something that we can manage? Are we just falling apart as humanity and becoming more mentally ill, or are we able to bounce back? Is the narrative incorrect? Do we need to change it? So I'm going to address some of those things. And the way I'm going to start it off with tonight is to first, on a very positive note, help you to understand what the mind is, what the brain is, how they're related, how they are not the same thing, and then move into understanding things like mindsets, understanding the fact that scientifically you are wired for love, that there isn't a circuit in your brain or your body for anything toxic. So where do toxic decisions and bitterness and anger and depression and all these things come from? We're going to look at those concepts. And I'm going to talk about something that is not addressed enough in mental health across the board, and that is how to use your memory, how important memory is, how we are always learning. We are thinking beings. We are always thinking. When you think, you feel. When you think and feel, you choose. When you think, feel, and choose, you learn. So you're always learning, which means you're always building memory. And part of your mental health is to constantly do this in a deep intellectual way. And if you don't do it, it will affect our mental health in ways that we are seeing happening around us, where kids are battling at school, where adults are battling at life, where people are, where things seem to just be going in a negative direction. Obviously not everything's negative, but if you look at what the federal data released in 2014, between 2014 and 2015, we see that the decades-long trend of people living longer and living healthier lives actually reversed. So for hundreds of years, with the advances of medicine and technology, we have been seeing an increase in lifespan and an increase in the quality of lifespan until 2014 and 2015. Between 2014 and 2015, there was a sudden shift. This shift didn't just happen then, it began 60 years ago. It reached its peak between 2014 and 2015, and it's on a downward spiral if we don't change it. What does that translate? How do we translate that back into a daily kind of concept? Well, what we're finding is that people are dying 15 to 25 years younger than they should in this current generation. Every generation faces unique problems, and this generation's unique problem is people dying younger, not because of some kind of weird illness that's hit us, but because of a lack of mind management. Our mental self-care, the way we're managing our minds, has gone backwards for the last 60 years. So instead of developing and processing things through our minds and using our minds like they should be, we've almost been trained not to use our minds correctly, and that pertains to academics, to learning, to memory, to managing trauma, to dealing with toxic habits, to lifestyle choice. All this is lifestyle. Choices of food, diet, exercise, just how are we doing, managing stress, resilience, all this kind of stuff, burnout. The way we used to manage and the way we've been managing for the last 60 years has changed, and it's changed in the negative direction, and this has resulted in people dying younger. And this is not information that's free, that it's out there. The research statistics are out there, but it's not made very public because it's not a very nice thing to tell people. So not many people the general public's not aware of this, but this is very often the case. Science is always 20 years ahead of before it's basically disseminated to the general public. So we will find research results and things changing in science, and then it'll take about 20 years for that to filter down into the current generations. And what I'm trying to do with my work is close that gap and make people aware of this. And it's not just myself, but there's teams of scientists that are on the same journey, and we work together in different parts of the world to try and get this message through in different ways. So essentially all my work, all the books I write, all my podcasts, my blogs, the app that we just released are all trying to help people understand that you don't have to be part of the statistic, that you do have control over your mind, and that you can reverse this terrible trend that is occurring. This trend is really scary because it actually means your children and your grandchildren are going to die 15 to 25 years younger than they should. And this is all preventable. It's totally preventable. And the research is tracking this reversal of trends right directly to lifestyle diseases, or that's the wrong word, taking it directly to lifestyle or management of our lifestyles. And lifestyle is the big umbrella term for the decisions we make with our mind about how we manage stress, how we are responding to the traumas of life, how we're dealing with all the issues of life, the events and circumstances, what we're eating, exercise, etc. Okay, so that's just a little background. So the way I'm going to tackle tonight, as I mentioned, is we're going to dive into the concepts in my book, Think, Learn, Succeed, and look at the power of the mind and understand the mind-brain connection. Tomorrow I'm going to go into a bit more depth about this preventable lifestyle disease concept and mental health, mental illness, and continue the concepts in that direction. So we'll see how far we get tonight, and I'll explain exactly where I'll pick up tomorrow morning, so if you want to follow through on the sequence. Okay, so I've got lots of slides to show you. The first slide is that you are not your brain. Okay, so we are told in today's age, and has been the message that has been coming through for 60 years, that you are basically your brain. You're a biological automaton, and your brain dictates the pace. So the firing of your neurons, when they get enough energy, when they fire at a certain energy, boom, you get a bit of mind as a residual artifact. You pre-programmed, you're basically dancing to your DNA, as Dawkins says, and if you happen to have a bad gene hand or a bad brain, well, bad luck, you got to live with it. And that is a terribly incorrect scientific philosophy. It's called materialistic reductionism, and it doesn't even go along with the science. The science isn't even saying that. Yet it's a very easy way of selling drugs. It's also a very easy way of just trying to put people in a box and measure people and take the humanity out of people. It's very dehumanizing. So, for example, if you've been to war, or you're dealing with some kind of traumatic issue, you've been bullied, or you've been raped, or you've gone through something, poverty, or like just recently we were in the US Virgin Islands, and the hurricanes they had there too in 2017. One lady came up to meet me after a conference that I was doing there, and she said to me that she literally had witnessed her husband's head being severed in front of her in the midst of this hurricane, and in their home, the window, I don't quite know the details, but this trauma that she experienced was, as you can imagine, incredibly dramatic. And here when she came up to me, she had this huge smile on her face. Not that she hadn't experienced incredible grief. We're not made for this kind of level of grief. It broke her down. She was traumatized. She's still traumatized, but it's not something you ever get over. It's something she's going through. So you never get over grief. You never get over something like that, but you learn to move forward through that. And that is what I try and help people do, is to understand that we can't suppress that pain. That's trauma she's gone through. This woman was offered all kinds of antidepressants to suppress the pain. She decided not to go that route. She decided to go the route of processing that pain, going through that grief, dealing with that issue in community. You can't do this alone. As humans, we need deep, meaningful connections. One of the greatest antidepressants is deep, meaningful connections. And this is vitally important, that we realize that we have to have a community focus. We have to be putting funding into transforming our communities at a local level. And the churches are great places to kind of start this and move outwards from there. I'm on the Mental Health Initiative in Washington, and this is one of the proposals that I put forward, is we have to have local community environments within churches or wherever, community centers, and build relationships within communities and move outward from there. So we've got to start looking at this thing differently and seeing that life is tough. This woman went through a trauma that was something she couldn't control, but she needed her community to help her to process and go through. She now has become part of that community, and she now reaches out and helps other people that are going through grief and helps them to process, not by telling them what to do. You can never tell someone else what to do. You can never solve a problem for someone else. What you can do is come alongside them. And there isn't enough of that. I don't know if you're aware, but in the United States is one of the most individualized societies, that our youth are the loneliest in the world, and that more people, as many, if not more people, die annually from isolation as from cardiovascular disease and cancer. So, we have a major problem. A survey was done, and many surveys have been done like this, but the one I'm quoting is a huge one where they interviewed people in Japan, which has a very community versus individualistic kind of focus. And the question they asked was, what's the most important thing that you as a person, as a human, believe you should be doing? And the answer in Japan was consistently to be part of a community and to have deep, meaningful connections and to do everything to uplift the community. When they join a firm, a company, it's like a family relationship. They stay there for life. Everything is geared towards support and community, and not just you, but you in the community. In America, they were asked the same question, and the answer was me, myself, and I, my goals, my achievements, my purpose, my vision, my goals, my whatever, passion. And research shows that the more times that you have I, me, and mine in your speech, the more you increase your chance of dying by 42% of a cardiovascular issue within the next 12 months. So we've got to start re-looking at how we are doing life. We're doing it in the wrong way. So that's like, if you look at that, now you need to know, as humans, how are we made? What is this whole mind thing? How do we do this? What does it all mean? You're not your brain. You're not this firing of neurons. Free will is not an illusion. What we are brilliant, deep-thinking, intellectual beings that crave community, that crave connection, that are going to go through stuff. And it's okay to go through stuff. We need to understand the narrative that you are going to be sad, and it's okay to be sad sometimes. You're going to experience depression. You're going to experience anxiety. This is part of life. You can't control the events and circumstances of life, but you can control your reactions to the events and circumstances. So if we don't teach people how to control reactions from our kids from very young all the way through, and if we are told the message that you can't control your reactions, if you're sad, you've got a disease in your brain, some neuropsychiatric brain illness, great dinner party talk, isn't it? To say, who's going to sit next to you. If you are told not to, if you're not allowed to process what you're going through, that's a problem. Someone who's come back from war and who's seen bodies blown all over the place, who's had to do things that go against their natural human nature, they don't have an illness of PTSD. They have an experience that has made them traumatized. And that has to be processed. And if you numb it with drugs, they're not going to process, they're going to get worse. And that is what the research is showing, that if we don't process our stuff in community, people will get worse. So the statistics that are being quoted are not that mental illness is on the rise. It's that the mismanagement of the issues of life, the mismanagement is on the rise, which has resulted in a whole new problem. And then we see that one physician a day is committing suicide because they're so stressed out that they don't want to go and talk to their colleagues, because the minute you do, you get a label of mental illness and it'll affect your career. We are seeing 20 to 22 people in the military committing suicide every day. And I know there's someone from the police force here. I'm not exactly sure what the statistics are, but I know they're pretty close. So in other words, we have got and that's just a few, I can carry on. So what we have is and this is different to how it was 60 years ago. These statistics are getting worse. So as we become more individualized and we don't allow good mental self-care, good mental hygiene within community, and we don't allow ourselves to get depressed, to get anxious, to go through to process these things, to embrace the psychotic breaks, it's all these different things that are the result of the traumas of life. If we don't allow ourselves to process in community and get through them and move forward, we're not going to progress as humanity. We're going to go backwards, which is exactly what is happening. So we can change that. We don't have to be part of that statistic, but it takes, that's why I speak at a grassroots level. That's why I appeal to the communities as well as from top down and bottom up, because it is us that makes the difference. It just takes a handful of people to affect thousands. It takes a few thousand people to affect millions. So, it takes one community to start transforming environments. Just a month ago, I was in Bremerton at a church that has actually now built a community center in the middle of Bremerton, in the middle of a really bad area, and this is a beacon on the hill, and it has become an area, an environment where there's a basketball court, and it's used for basketball during the week. On Sundays, they use it as a church. There's all these little rooms where the kids come and learn computer skills. It's also become an environment where the kids that have got nowhere safe to go after school are going there to do their homework. And there's a little log out the front, and we're doing what we've put in there into this community centre. It's friends of ours that are running it, a concept that I developed back in South Africa, which is called bench therapy, where you just literally sit and listen to people. And they've got this beautiful little wooden log bench with a little pond. It didn't cost very much. And this is where these people know when you sit there, someone will come and listen to you. And it's become a place where these kids are coming and just sitting and talking. There's a chance to experience, and people in the community, there's no necessarily a hierarchy of the doctor's got to help the child on the bench. It is whoever's sitting on the bench is either going to speak to someone or listen to someone. So it's creating that environment. Back in Zimbabwe, where I was born, they have one of the most successful mental health systems. That was the most successful till drugs were psychotropic medications were brought into the community. But prior to that, they had the first version of bench therapy, which was a granny sitting on a log. There was this one tribe where the granny sat on a log, and what did she do? Everyone just came and spoke to her. She never judged anyone. She just listened. You could tell her anything. Absolutely anything. And everyone, the good and the bad and the ugly, all went and spoke to the granny on the log. And it was so successful for mental health processing that Harvard University and King's University did a study on this, showing that this is one of the most effective ways, community helping each other. And that's like, it doesn't make money, and you can't patent a drug, so you can't make money out of it. So we've got to re-look at the narrative. We've got to recognize the qualification you need to help your mental health and others' mental health is love, being a human, reaching out and connecting with others. So in order to do that, I want to tell you, you're not your brain. Your mind and your brain are separate things. Your mind is not your brain. Your mind is 99% of who you are. Your mind works through your brain. This is called interactive dualism, where your mind moves through your brain and your brain responds to your mind. So if you've been in war, or you're in a traumatic situation, or you're in a very stressful kind of job, or you're being affected by the socioeconomic and political environment you're in, or you're being bullied, or whatever the situation, that is your mind. You are experiencing that with your mind, and you're processing it through your brain. So your brain is a responder. And it is a storehouse. It stores your memories that you build with your mind, and it responds to your mind. So your mind works through your brain, and your brain responds on a quantum level and on an electrical and chemical level. So look at the next slide, and you'll see an image of an actual slide of inside the brain. This is a real person. It's used very advanced brain technology, a combination of different technologies. In my current clinical trials, we use some of this technology. We use QEEGs and different technology to look at the response of humans as they deliberately control their thinking. So what you're looking at here is actually what's happening in your brains now while you're listening to me. It's what happens in your brains all day long. You are seeing your mind. That firing up is literally your mind moving through your brain, and your brain responding on a quantum, electrical, chemical, and genetic level. So as you're listening to me now, I am generating sound waves. All the information that you're seeing is electromagnetic light waves. You're getting a whole complex reaction. I'm generating photons. You're generating photons. We've got all this energy exchange, and this stimulation is basically stimulating you to think. And as you think, you feel. And as you think and feel, you choose. And you keep doing this. And this thinking, feeling, and choosing generates this cloud of energy through the brain. And then as you think and feel, it's like this massive cloud. Think of a wave building on a beach. So as you're hearing me now, it's this wave is building of energy in your brain. And then as you choose, it collapses. As soon as it collapses, you get an electrical, chemical, and genetic reaction in your brain. And you start growing stuff in your brain. When your genes express, you make stuff, and that stuff holds the information in a vibratory form in tiny little protein computers. You are doing this right now. So you are thinking, feeling, and choosing every 10 seconds on a conscious level, 40 times a second on a subconscious level, and 400 billion actions per second on an unconscious level. Your non-conscious level operates 24/7. I'll show you images of that in a moment. Your conscious level only operates when you're awake. Your subconscious operates when you're kind of waking up, and then during the day while you're awake until you go to sleep at night again. So there's kind of 3 parts of your mind. Now this mind, therefore, if you want a definition of mind, mind is your thinking, feeling, and choosing. It's how you uniquely think, feel, and choose, and how you uniquely generate your energy through your brain. Because your perception of what you're hearing now is totally different to the person sitting next to you. You are hearing the same words, you're seeing the same thing, but you're seeing and hearing it differently because you have a unique take on life. Even your proteins are vibrating differently to the person next to you because you have your own unique perception. Your brain is attuned and designed to suit your mind. So you have this incredible, powerful mind, and with your mind, you are creating matter. Because right now, at 400 billion actions per second, you are building my words into these little protein, quantum neurobiological computers in your brain. You're doing this right now as we're speaking. So you are making matter out of mind. So mind over matter does exist. We are actually, and the matter you build really does matter. Because it's from the physical thoughts in your brain that you speak words. So I'm not just speaking random words. I have spent time thinking, feeling, choosing, and studying this information. So I am speaking from the networks that I have built in my brain with my mind. So your mind is 99% of who you are. This is something I've been researching for 30 years, trying to understand the mind-brain connection, the science of thought. What is memory? How do we build memory? How do we get rid of toxic thoughts? How do we manage trauma? How do we manage our reactions in the midst of the chaos of life? So your mind is 99% of who you are. Your mind is this non-physical thing. It's this spiritual part of you. And 60 years ago, they said that the mind didn't count. So we have a whole body of scientific research that looks at the mind but pretends it doesn't exist. So they will do research where they'll tell people, read this or look at this picture or do this or do that. So they're doing stuff. They're reacting. Or they're talking about what they've gone through. So they're using their mind, and then they're looking at the response in the brain, and they're saying the brain made them do it. But if I haul one of your brains out of your head right now, which I won't do, and hold it in my hand and it's all bleeding, we can look at this brain all day. It's not going to do anything. But in your head, you alive, you are generating the action that controls your brain. Okay? Yes, trauma does happen. Yes, brain damage does happen. Yes, car accidents happen. Yes, you get exposed to chemical poisons. Yes, you eat the modern American diet, which destroys your brain. Yes, you have all these, and it's true. I have a book on that called Think and Eat Yourself Smart. And seriously, 60 years ago, at the same time as we started ignoring mind, we started introducing industrialized food-like products, and they destroy the brain. So if you constantly throw your computer on the floor, it's not going to work very well. So you constantly feed your brain the modern American diet, you destroy your brain and your body. So a lot of that and your brain and body feed back into your mind. So you've got a feedback loop going. So we have to be mindful. Lifestyle diseases are killing people, and they're preventable. How do you prevent them? You need to recognize that with your mind, you make food choices. With your mind, you make choices about what you put onto your body and into your body. With your mind, you make choices about how you're going to react to those words someone's just spoken over you. You can let those words penetrate your spirit and completely affect you. You can let those words, or you can let them bounce off you and realize that those harsh words someone's just spoken over you are coming from someone who's hurting, because hurting people hurt other people. And maybe if you stay calm, not only do you keep your own brain and body health protected, because if you get toxic signals coming in your body, you're going to get brain damage. So if you receive those toxic words, you literally build brain damage in. Or you can literally put up a shield by saying, I'm going to protect myself, and I'm going to reflect back love. And love will neutralize. So I'm not going to react. And that's hard. When someone's triggering you, it's really hard not to react. But when you train yourself not to react, you're actually going to ease the situation. You're going to pour love back in the situation, protect yourself, and help that other person. And yes, they may carry on doing that for the rest of their life, but you at least have demonstrated something that they will never forget. And you've made a difference in humanity, which is what we're supposed to do. That is what being human is all about. It's not about me, myself, and I. So when someone hurts you, it's not about, oh, they've hurt me. It's all about, okay, I've got to protect myself so that I react correctly, because if I take this into me, I'm going to affect myself, and it's going to take all the wisdom out of my life in that moment. And then you're going to feel awful afterwards, because your body and brain are not designed for that. So we see that our brain is wired from neuroscience, which is one of the fields that I work in. Neuroscience, we see that the brain and the body are wired for love. So if your mind is 99% and of who you are, and your mind is your thinking, feeling, choosing, your brain and your body collectively are 1% of who you are. And your brain and your body are made up of around 75 to 100 trillion cells, quite a lot of cells. And every single thought that you're thinking is bathing your cells in an energy that affects your blood chemistry and affects the inside of your cells and affects your DNA, and even affects things called the telomeres, which are little socks on your chromosomes, which are very important for health, longevity, and mental clarity, and just focus and peace. And what we're finding from the current clinical trials, we're looking at telomeres, what we're finding from the research in telomeres is that your mind, if you don't have a disciplined mind, if you're not working constantly on embracing that pain, processing, going through, attempting to get that mind, those thoughts under control, attempting to renew your mind, if you're not doing that as a lifestyle, you are then going to shorten your telomeres, which means you're going to shorten your lifespan, in addition to a million other things, by the way. That's just one of the things that we're doing. So with our minds, we are creating these environments. Now, let's say that, for example, you've had a cancer diagnosis, or you've got major cardiovascular disease, and you want some medication. I don't want you now suddenly thinking, oh dear, I caused it. Well, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Who knows? Maybe it was the environment, maybe it was your reactions, maybe you didn't know. We're all doing dumb things all the time. We're all crazy. We all react incorrectly. So we're all unfortunately causing damage. So we don't have to get our guilt and shame and condemnation, because that's just going to make it worse. What we have to do is be realists. Yes, I've made some wrong decisions. I'm not sure of the impact, but I do know that there's a mind-brain connection, because you're learning about it tonight. So how can I reverse this? By getting your mind under control, by learning to actually control and get back into this wired for love design that I'm starting to explain to you, you can actually reverse a lot of the damage that's been done. You can also learn to live with cancers and cardiovascular disease. There are numerous studies showing that people who have been given a 3-month or a 6-month life expectancy because of some illness in their body, because their mindsets are so great, because their attitudes are so great, because they just filled with peace, because they're helping others, they have increased their own healing by a factor of 68%. So they live for years. Can you be content in the midst of your trauma? That is true success. Success is not having money in the bank. Success is not being a famous person with a lot of followers on Instagram. Success is not all those things. Success is an inner peace. It is an inner peace of the recognition of who you are in the midst of it's the ability to cry, scream, shout, swear, and go through the issues. It's the ability to reach out and help others. It's the ability to admit when you're wrong. It's the ability to keep learning. It's the ability to recognize it's okay to feel depressed sometimes and anxious sometimes, because our resilience will grow, and we will get through it. Somehow we will get through it. That is what success is. It comes from inside. You can't just keep going on happiness courses or going on another positive affirmation course and trying to put something external inside. It doesn't work. It's a Band-Aid approach. It's still festering within. You've got to deal with your stuff. You've got to embrace and process your stuff. And we've got to do that in community. And this, what I'm telling you, was stopped. Was not everyone, obviously there's therapy and counseling and everything, but the general gold standard of mind treatment is one of, if you're sad, you have an illness, like cardiovascular disease or like diabetes, and you have to have it treated like an illness, but it's not like that. So let me dive into that more tomorrow. Let's talk more about the power of the mind, and let's have a look at the next slide. My computer has jammed. Mac, have you got the next slide up for me? Okay, I have a frozen computer here. So, Mac, you're just going to have to get the slides up for me. Okay, there we go. How you use your mind is predictive of how successful and healthy you will be. How do you take care of your mind, which takes care of everything else? This is critical. This is one of the things I really want us to think about tonight and today and tomorrow. Are you taking care of your mind? You know, if you go to the gym, you're taking care of your body. If you're choosing to eat a healthy, real food diet, which I talk about over here. I don't talk about diets. I just talk about eating real food mindfully, and I teach you what that is. If you are mindfully making those, or you take it's what I'm trying to say is it's kind of easy to take care of your body and your physical needs, but are you taking care of your mind? Are you spending the time doing the things that I'm about to share with you? You see, you are wired, and you can't answer yet because I haven't told you what they are, but I'm going to tell you what they are. Okay? So, one of the first things in terms of taking care of your mind is understanding what I started saying a moment ago, and that is that you're wired for love. In science, we call it the optimism bias. We do not have a circuit, we do not have a protein, we do not have a structure in your brain or body, in any one of the 75 to 100 trillion cells of your brain and body on a macro and micro level for anything toxic. Okay? So we literally are, quantum physicists tell us that we are literally at our most fundamental level waves of love energy. And then that translates back up into the subatomic level, and then into the atomic level, and then into cells, etc., into the physical. So we see each other physically, but at our most fundamental level, we are literally waves of love. So on this physical thing, we have this ability to think, feel, and choose. Choosing being very key in the think and feel. When you think, you feel. When you feel, you choose. Those three always go together. You can't just think without feeling. You can't think and feel without choosing. You're always doing those three together, and that's your mind. So as you choose, because you're so brilliant, you can choose between, thank you come fix this. You can choose between different, you may have to switch it on and off. It's just completely frozen for some reason. So you can make a choice between operating in the love zone or in the fear zone. So the toxic tree over there is representative of toxic thinking. And the reason I use trees is because you, as a thinking, feeling, choosing human being, you build thoughts. And thoughts look like trees. And thoughts are real things. And thoughts are memories, okay? So you can choose, and you can either choose to build healthy or toxic depending on how you react. So the person speaking toxic words over you, you can choose to react negatively or not react negatively. And if you react negatively and you get triggered and you end up having an argument or whatever, you've built a toxic tree. Because every experience that you have results in a physical change in your brain and becomes the root of your words and your actions. But fortunately, we have neuroplasticity. I did some of the first work on neuroplasticity back in the 80s, and I was told by my professors that the brain can't change and it's ridiculous to even try and think it can change. And I said, I don't believe that. I believe if you change your mind, you will change your brain, and therefore you will change your behaviors on a cognitive, emotional, academic, intellectual level. So I proceeded to work with people with traumatic brain injuries. I've got published papers. You can have a look. I did a TED talk where I spoke about this. And basically what I found was that, and not only myself, but a lot of people, scientists around the world working in this area, was that if you think, you change your brain. By the mid-90s, with the advent of fMRI technology, we could then see this happening in the brain. So your brain is like plastic. It molds according to your experience. So as you are thinking, you are changing, constantly changing the structure of your brain. Are we winning over here? Mm-mm. Okay, no, okay. So just pull the slides up for me on the screen. I will. Okay. So just leave it, and I'll try and fix it in between. Okay, so basically you are able to think, feel, and choose and change the structure of your brain and redesign your brain on a moment-by-moment basis. So your thinking is becoming part of your cells, and you can change it. And this is the beautiful thing. You're not stuck with that. Every thought you build has an eternal value. It lives forever. But you can either keep it toxic or you can reconceptualize it. So the principles that I developed in my work are to find out how can we embrace those thoughts and change them, reconceptualize them. So, oh, well done, you fixed it. Okay, fantastic. So, well done. So second by second, you are changing your brain by the way you use your mind. That's powerful. Second by second, you are changing your brain by the way you use your mind, the way you use your thinking, feeling, choosing. The consciousness of your mind is becoming the cells of the matter of your brain. With each thought you think, you are signaling your brain to create new neural connections. Okay? You need to use this power deliberately and intentionally. Because whatever you think is changing the structure of your brain and is going to produce what you say and what you do. So therefore, you need to become very deliberate in self-regulating. So in the study of neuroscience and quantum physics, I wanted to try and understand, how do we do this conscious thing? What does self-regulation mean? It means observing your thinking, feeling, and choosing and controlling it. So you use your mind to control your mind. Because as you use your mind to control your mind, you're changing your brain and you are putting what you want in your brain so that what you want comes out. So if there's damage from whatever, your mind is more powerful than that damage, and you can learn to deal with it. So if there is trauma in your brain, if there is brain damage in your brain, if you have been exposed to toxins, if you have got some major physical illness in your body, by the way you use your mind, you are changing the environment of the cells, you're changing the blood chemistry, you're changing the energy flow, which then enables you to have that intrinsic success, which means you can still be peaceful and smiling and crying and still going on through whatever you're going through. How impressed are we with people? Not impressed is the wrong word. It's so moving and uplifting to speak to someone who's been through trauma who's still got a smile on their face. I mean, that woman who came up to me, I was shocked. She looked so happy. And then she told me her story. I wanted to start crying. I felt bad. And she just said no. She said she's not, and that's when we talked about the fact that you don't get, when you've gone through a grief situation, and I've done a whole podcast on this, the worst thing you can say to someone who suffered grief is to say, time will heal. Okay? Time never heals. You just learn how to get through it. You learn how to move forward. And you don't want to forget those memories, you want to remember, but you want to learn to replace the painful ones with the good ones. Okay? So that is a choice that she's made. She changed her brain, this particular woman. You can do that. We all go through stuff. The Japanese have an incredible principle called the kintsugi principle. You may be familiar with it. And what it is if a vase or a beautiful pot, porcelain, ceramic pot breaks, they don't sweep the pieces away. They meticulously pick up each piece and they rebuild the pot using glue with gold in it. So at the end of that process, you have this beautiful new reconceptualized pot or vase or ceramic dish or whatever it is that is now got all these little gold little marks in it. So it's beautiful, but that's the story of the suffering of the broken pot. And that's the story that we need. We live in a world now which says you've got some broken pieces of your life, let's sweep it under the carpet, let's numb it with a psychotropic drug. Let's tell you're ill, you're going to have got to live with this. You don't have to live broken. You can rebuild with the gold. But that takes you making a decision to use your thinking, feeling, choosing. How are you going to handle those words? How are you going to handle that trauma? One of the people on my team is a lawyer, and her husband is in the military, and he was seeing terrible things in his, it's a high classified stuff, so I can't talk exactly what he was doing, but it was terrible. She was a prosecutor, so she would look at photographs of murder victims, and she would have to, basically prosecute on the case, etc. And the one day she cracked. She had an 8-year-old daughter, and she saw a photograph of a child that had been raped who was 8 years old. And the pictures were horrific, as you can imagine. And the picture that got her the most was this little chubby finger holding onto a teddy bear, and that it was all muddied and bloodied, and it was terrible. I'm being graphic, but this totally traumatized her. She went home. She just collapsed. She just started drinking. Her relationship with her husband he was battling with his trauma. He couldn't talk about it. She was battling with hers. Someone actually gave them my book, and they read through it, and they started talking about their trauma. They started processing their trauma. They've transformed. She's now a defense attorney. She's on our team. She helps us with all kinds of things. This is another story of someone who's taken the pot and put gold in it. And this is but you can't do that alone. It was in community. So her and her husband came together. Someone gave her the book, those friends stood around her. It was in community. Okay, so we're wired for love. We're not wired to see children murdered. We're not wired to see what's going on around us. We are wired for love, and we see this scientifically. So we can change, we can always rebuild, we can reconceptualize. Okay, so you basically, and the more you work at this is not an instant quick fix. In the first part of this book, I talk about technology, and technology is fantastic. Absolutely wonderful way of communicating. But the problem is that it's also changed the way we think. We want everything to be a quick fix. So it's made, everything's instant. Everything, we don't think things through. We just want, like, give me a tablet, give me a quick fix, let me find this quickly. So we've become instant quick fix society. And that's not how we are designed as humans. The brain takes time to build and to process. In my research on memory, and I talk about that in the third part of this book, it takes you at least 63 days to form a automated way of thinking, which is a habit, not 21, at least 63. And it's in cycles of 21. When you cut your finger, your body doesn't heal in an instant. It takes 3 weeks, more or less, for stem cells to form, for the healing to take place. And then there will be cycles of 23, however many are needed for the full healing to take place. So in all my programs, I've built this process of cycles of 21 into the process of how we function. Now, what we see in this whole self-regulating of our mind, this whole ability to stand back and observe our own thinking, which I teach in all my materials, and I talk about it in this book that we're talking about now, is you are actually able to observe, stand back and observe your own thinking, feeling, and choosing every 10 seconds. So literally 6 times a minute, you are able to observe your own thinking. So as a human, we have the physical equipment to be able to use our mind is able to use our brain in such a way that you can become constantly self-regulated. You can literally control every thought. Now, how many thoughts does a human think in a day? Scientists estimate somewhere between 8,000 or 18,000 and 180,000. If we take an average of about 30,000, which is the most commonly used number, whatever it is, if it's 18, if it's 8,000, if it's 30,000, it's a lot of thoughts. And we're supposed to control every single one because every single thought is the result of thinking, feeling, and choosing. And we have got a window of time when we make the wrong choices. We have a window of 24 to 48 hours before this thing sets in and starts becoming harder to fix, to actually eliminate. So if you don't eliminate within 24 to 48 hours, you can still fix it, but it just takes that much more work. And this is a lifestyle. So this is not something that you can just do once. We need to train ourselves to get into a lifestyle of being self-regulated. So it's in your relationship. Are you snapping at your husband or wife? Are you snapping at your kids? Are you catching yourself whining and moaning? Are you, watch yourself. Observe yourself. Train yourself to observe yourself. So this is what I would train my patients to do in therapy. And so what I did was, just recently we launched an app, and we'll show you a picture. I don't know if Mac can pull it up quickly, the picture of the app. But we've just launched an app called Switch, because I'm trying to switch people's minds to the self-regulated mode. And what I'm doing is building all these concepts into a very user-friendly way that you can actually train yourself to be self-regulated. So let's talk a little bit more. I'm going to talk more about that tomorrow, but if you want to take a screenshot of that, a photo of that, you are welcome to. So we actually have 810 cells that our bodies are creating every second. You are creating 810,000 cells every second. And the quality of those cells is dependent on your thinking, feeling, and choosing. Okay, so I'm trying to show you how important it is to not just be reactive, but to be a proactive, deliberate, intentional, self-regulated thinker in everything, from the time you open your eyes till the time you go to bed. And you're going to make mistakes. As I said, we're all crazy. But that's okay, because what you do is you celebrate your mistakes. Now, this is a really foreign concept to most people, because why would I celebrate my mistakes? Why would I rejoice in my regrets? Okay, because if I am aware of something, I'm rejoicing, because the minute that I'm aware, I'm not aware for the bad thing I did, but I'm rejoicing and celebrating the fact that I'm aware, because science shows that the minute that we are aware of something, it moves from the non-conscious, which operates 24/7 and is very powerful, operates in it's quantum speeds, present, past, and future don't even exist. So it operates at speeds of 10 to the 27. Okay, when anything's in the non-conscious, it's influencing how you function. But as soon as you bring it from the non-conscious to the conscious mind, it becomes weakened. So literally the little branches become weakened. I'm going to show you pictures of this tomorrow, not tonight. Okay? And the little branches start melting off. But if it's suppressed through drugs, or suppressed through, I'm not going to think about this, I'm not going to deal with this, I'm going to push it down, I'm not going to face this issue, that's going to cause physical and mental issues. It's going to cause the desire. Addiction is not a disease. Addiction is because there's stuff that's undealt with, and you can't handle it, so you're trying to suppress the pain. We're told that, we all know about the opioid epidemic. We're not even told about the psychotropic epidemic, which is actually worse. That's the next one that's going to be hitting us. Well, it's already hit us, but we're not talking about it yet. Now, any kind of addiction, whether it's to alcohol, porn, opioids, psychotropics, food, sex, whatever, there's no chemical hook catching you. It is pain. These things are painful. They're difficult to deal with. And if you don't process them, or you're not allowed to embrace them and process them in community, with support, you can't do this alone, okay? You are going to basically try and do something, like there'll be an addiction, so addiction's basically just trying to deal, it's distorted love. The addiction means consumed by. We're wired to be consumed by love. So when you don't have love operating, then you're going to, it becomes toxic. So by embracing and celebrating the fact that it's weakened, you can now go through the tears and the trauma and the pain, but you're going to get through it. And you will get up, because when we're in community and when we face things, when we embrace and process, we change, we will rise again. This thing will restore. We will be healed again. And it's going to take time. It's not going to be a quick fix. As I said, technology, we want a quick fix. It's not quick. It could take you years. But in the process, you are changing, you are growing, your sufferings become part of you. And because all of us are in the same boat, no longer are you the one with mental illness. It's all of us with mental health that's being challenged. See, it's another narrative, it's another perspective. So why do I'm not saying that depression is not real. It's very real, it's very serious. OCD, intrusive thoughts, schizophrenia, these are not illnesses. They are very real phenomena. Very real, very serious, but they are not in your physical body. They will reflect there, but they are not, the cause is not in your biology. The cause is in what's happened in your life, in your story, the narrative of your story. So what's happening today is that if in the current narrative, we are told that unless we say it's an illness, it's almost like it's not acknowledged. We have to say it's an illness to validate it. But why does your trauma at war, why did my friend who had to constantly look at those photographs and eventually see that photograph that made her crack, why does she have to have an illness? Is it not the trauma she's experienced? That woman who saw her husband's head severed, she's not ill, she's traumatized. Now, yes, because your experience moves through your brain and your brain responds chemically, electrically, electromagnetically, and genetically, you build the experience into your brain. So you will have a reaction, but that's not the cause. My friend didn't get trauma because of something in her brain. My friend got trauma because she was in her work, from her work environment, which then caused the change in the brain. So as she learned to process it and work through it, to embrace it, to process it, to reconceptualize over time, and she's still working through stuff, she then changed this. So no longer is it toxic, it's now kintsugi. It's now a pot with gold. So we transform. So she can talk about it now. And you can hear one of you go and look at if you go to my podcast, you'll see her name is Laurie Falkman. You can listen to her story. She now can talk about that. So basically, we have this, when we shift our mind to understand our mind in a more deliberate way, we can change how we're functioning. And we can do this every 10 seconds, but it takes practice. So if you want to know more about my research, by the way, here's just a slide of it. We are constantly doing research all the time. As I said, we've just done the most amazing set of clinical trials where we've looked at physiology, neurophysiology, different types of blood telomeres, well-being scales, all kind of narrative to show that when people are put into an environment where they are taught how to deliberately and intentionally self-regulate, and the Switch app that I spoke about earlier on is part of this clinical trial. As we get results, I feed that back into the community. It'll be all on my site for free, and I put that into books and whatever to help all of you. So if you want to know more and follow us on that in terms of this whole mind-brain thing, please do. Please follow us. Okay, so when it comes to this mental self-care toolbox, it's not social media follows, it's not diet fads, it's not pills. Mac, you can bring up this slide. It's not quick fixes, it's not a computer program, it's not positive affirmations, it's mental self-care. So what we're talking about is mental self-care. Okay? And how are you going to do this mental self-care? The first thing is we have to go through this process where we recognize that our mind is not our brain. Okay? We have to recognize, understand that our mind is this 99% and our brain is this 1% brain and body. And that our mind changes our brain. This is very empowering. It's very hopeful. Okay? The second thing is that you have to detox your brain every day for the rest of your life. One of the main reasons people are dying younger, the reversal of trends, is because they're not detoxing their brain. What is detoxing the brain? It is exactly the example that I've just given you. My friend who's the lawyer who went through that process, her detoxing was to face the fact that these painful images, her work was affecting her too much, that she had to get through this pain. She had to process this. She had to work out a way of dealing with this. She hadn't been speaking about it. She'd been suppressing all her emotions. She'd go to work, do her work, come home, and it was affecting everything. She was changing as a mother, as a wife, everything. So she had to get it out. She had to cry. She had to process. She had to scream. She had to question. She had to go through the process. So that is detoxing, and that is not an overnight process. So in detoxing your brain, what I've tried to understand is that, okay, so here's my friend Laurie, who's now built these thoughts. So now, how did she build them, and can she unbuild them? So that is the science of thought. So I spent many years researching that. I put my theories into the book in a simple version as well. And basically, there's 5 steps that you go through when you build a thought, and building a thought is building memory, and you use those same 5 steps to detox. Now, those 5 steps are in this book in the last section in terms of memory building. They are also in this book in terms of detoxing, and they are in the app, in the Switch app that I've just mentioned. But essentially what they are is, the first thing is you've got to embrace. You've got to embrace this and celebrate this. You've got to get this stuff up, and you do it one thought at a time. You don't work on 500 things at once. You work on one thought over these cycles of 21 days. You can stick with one thought for 63 days, if you're supposed to, and you can start a second thought once you've done the first 21 days. So you can be working on one toxic issue, and then the second 2 cycles are just very simple practice things, so it's not difficult. A lot of the work is in the first 21 days, okay? And once you've done one thought over 21 days, you can then start another and another. So you can work on 17 issues in a year. And those issues that we're working on, that I'm talking about working on in detoxing your brain, those are in 2 categories. The one are the toxic habits that we have voluntarily developed in our life, the triggers that we constantly justify, the behavior patterns that we know are wrong, but we just don't change them. The other is the involuntary. So the traumas of life that we go through that are unexpected, the bullying, the abuse, the whatever happens socioeconomic situations, political, etc., etc. Okay, so there's 2 categories. Both are toxic signals, both have to be detoxed. So what research has shown is that 7 to 16 minutes a day of detoxing is what you need to do for the rest of your life. Every day you spend 7 to 16 minutes. Now if you think, okay, where am I going to find that? Well, it's easy. I do it when I'm getting ready. I've just got into a habit. That's when find a time in your day where you get into a routine, and that's when you detox. And you don't spend longer than that detoxing, because detoxing is very emotionally draining. So you keep it to a limited amount, and you work on it little bit by little bit. This process is so effective that I used to have to stop my patients, because they'd get to the 3rd day and say, I got this, I'm done, give me the next thought. Okay? And you don't want to do that, because whatever work you've done in those 3 days is not enough to have stabilized the memory. So in other words, you wouldn't have completely destroyed the toxic and rebuilt the new one. And if you stop at that point, the protein structures that you built that hold the new kintsugi, beautiful gold pot thing, will just denature. They'll just become hot air, and you're back to square one, which is what happens with so many people. Totally enthusiastic, and then comes day 4. Most people give up around day 4. So you've got to push through for 21 days, and then you've got to practice for 7 seconds a day for another 42 days, which is super easy. We've put little, like your iPhone reminders, we've put that into the app. So they just pop up and remind you. It's literally just phrases that you remind yourself. So, for example, one of the things that I've been working on is I always used to get myself stuck in if only. Something would happen, and I'd often lose the joy of the moment, because I would think, I could have done it this way or that way. If only I did it this way. Anyone else done that? And it became, I actually embraced it so much that it became part of me, that I would actually spoil it for my family. When my kids would turn around and say, Mom, another if only moment. And it took that, but I had to choose, even though my family was telling me that I was stealing the joy of the moment, that they all had a great time. And then I'm saying, if only, that I was stealing the joy. I still had to make the choice to decide whether to change. So I put myself through a detox. It took me 63 days, and now I still keep my little reminder popping up on my phone. This was years ago I did this. And I still have my main issues that I know can pop up on my phone every day. Remember your if only. So it reminds me to not get back into that toxic mode, because for me it was very toxic. I was losing the joy of the moment. And those are the kind of things that can block you and cause brain damage. That if only was causing brain damage in my brain and affecting my body, affecting my relationships. And that may sound like a little thing, but it wasn't a little thing at that moment. That's just one example. Okay, so you've got to detox your brain. You have to do it every day for 15 minutes at least. Okay? The other thing is you need to build your brain, and that's what we have in this book over here. The same 5 steps that you use to detox your brain, which are in the Switch app, you've got them in this book as well. They are the same 5 steps, but to build your brain. I did a lot of my initial research in South Africa, as I mentioned, helping people with trauma, but also in the education environments. I was teaching people how to learn, how to build memory. And I initially started there because what we find, which is such an interesting principle in mental health, is that as humans, when we focus on growing our brain, in other words, learning new information, being intellectually stimulated, getting excited, this stimulates a lot of what we call gamma activity in the brain, which is a wave of electrical activity that is also linked to a very good quantum wave of energy that is linked to wisdom and insight and creativity. And it just literally pours health through every cell of your body. So when we intellectualize, we increase our physical body health and our brain's health. We also activate switches in our brain. We've got this little genetic switch. I'm just going to tell you about one in our hippocampus, which is inside the middle of our brain, and it's got a lot to do with converting short to long-term memory. And when this little switch activates, our resilience against stress increases. So we increase our resilience. We become stronger and more able to deal with things. When you connect meaningfully with other people, it also activates those genetic switches. So in our Wired for Love design, we have all these incredible responses that our body will have when we operate in deep, meaningful community and when we process. So when you are painfully dealing with your grief, or painfully facing something about yourself that you don't want to face, or going through that terrible trauma and talking it out, it's easier to suppress it. But that's so bad for your brain. When you talk it out, the pain of talking it out is really hard in the moment, but you will get through that. As you do that, not on your own, never in isolation, you're going to start building this resilience in your body, and it gets better and better all the time. But it does take time. So something like that can take multiple cycles to manage. Okay, so building your brain is a massive part of this. It increases your resilience. So I always recommend to spend at least an hour a day building your brain. I spend 2 hours every single day minimum building my brain. I spent the whole flight this morning, we flew from one side of the country to the next doing research. And I'm not trying to make myself better than anyone else, but it's become something that feeds my mind. I'm also preventing dementia. Dementias and Alzheimer's are not natural things that happen in a brain. Dementias and Alzheimer's basically come from 2 things: not detoxing your brain and not building up cognitive resilience. Okay, and there is a third component, but it's not as big of a component. Diet plays a massive role. Okay, a big role, not as big as. So detoxing your brain and building your brain are about 95%, and then diet is the other 5%. It doesn't mean that the 5%. Okay, well, I just won't address diet. It's not going to affect me. You got to, because it's the 100% that has the full effect. Okay, and diet can sometimes be up to 25% depending on your level of exposure to toxins and so on. So, but the main thing about Alzheimer's and dementia is that if you don't detox your brain and you don't build your brain, you don't build up cognitive reserve. So there's been studies, for example, and I've done a whole podcast on this as well. You should listen to the podcast, because I have a lot of 10, 15-minute short podcasts helping with all these basic concepts. There's a study done on nuns, a very famous study, where they all had the markers of Alzheimer's, but all of them lived to be centenarians and incredibly intellectual till the day they died, totally switched on, and they all had the markers of Alzheimer's in their brain, so which are the neurofibrillary tangles and plaques. And basically, what that's telling us, and we're seeing more and more of this research coming out, is that you can have all kinds of stuff going on in your brain, but your mind is more powerful than your brain. So if you're using your mind, you're going to keep yourself together. So I'm going to ask Mac, can you just bring up the memory section with all the inside the brain, spaghetti and meatballs. You'll see what that is in a moment. And I want to show you how important it is to build your brain. So when we talk about building our brain, we're talking about learning and building memory. Okay, so if you're at school, you're learning. If you're at university, you're learning. But you're also learning every single day. So if you're not in an academic environment, you're in work. And you can improve your ability to do your job by studying stuff about your work every day. There's so much information out there. So what I don't want you to do is to grab information like, like if you build a puzzle. And you take the puzzle pieces, and let's say it's a 5,000-piece puzzle, and you just take all the pieces of the puzzle, and you just start trying to build without any organization, and you just give up halfway, well, not even get going, and you give up. That's not good. What you should do when you're building a big puzzle or any puzzle is you sort the colors and who's built a puzzle lately. Very good exercise, okay? When you do that and then you take the time to build the puzzle, there's a lot of thinking. Now, I'm using this as an analogy of how we need to think things through. You mustn't just gather data like just build these piles of puzzle pieces. You need to take time to build the puzzle. So when I say study for an hour or two a day, you need to think deeply to be able to memorize, to understand, to remember information to the point where you could actually give a lecture on it, that you could go and write an exam on it, that you could have a decent conversation about it. So if it's politics that interests you, don't just scan through 5,000 different headlines. Choose 3 or 4 and then read them, but get your pen and paper out and follow these steps and actually study the stuff. If it's whatever you're interested in, and challenge yourself. Take something maybe that is kind of hard, a little bit beyond your comfort zone. Very good to stretch yourself. If you don't know what to study, I've got a simple solution. Get these 4 books and spend 2 hours a day studying them. And not only are you going to intellectualize, but you're going to gain these skills as well. And don't give your books away. Write all over them. Keep them next to your bedside table because these are lifestyle skills. Seriously. Okay, so if you have a look over here, we're looking inside the brain. And what you see there are, as one student said to me, it looks like spaghetti and meatballs. But that's not spaghetti and meatballs. That is your brain. And the thicker part at the one side there is the more you think, the more you learn, the more you build memory. So as you think, feel, and choose, you're causing genetic expression, which grows branches to hold the information. And so the more you think to understand, the more branches you grow, the more information you have, the more wisdom. The more you think about it, the more you integrate the networks. So your physical is just doing what your mind tells it to do. So the deeper you think, we will see a physical result of that in your brain. So, and that is a healthy brain. When you do that, that is a healthy brain. Your brain responds to that. So every morning when you wake up, you have all these incredible new baby nerve cells from a process called neurogenesis, new birth. And you are supposed to think deeply to build those into the scaffolds of the networks that you're building during the day. If you don't learn every day, if you don't think deeply about stuff every day, you're going to go to bed at night with a bunch of toxic waste in your brain. That's going to affect your sleep. It's going to affect when you go into, there's a million things, I'll tell you one. Okay? When you go into deep sleep, when you go into the delta wave, there's a certain there's a certain frequency in the delta wave where a certain enzyme called telomerase is released, and it has to be released in order for your DNA to work properly. And if it's not released, you're not going to have good cell division the next day. Your cells are you're going to battle with your cell division the next. It's going to happen, but it's going to be not great quality. Also, what happens is that as you are not learning, not only are you affecting your sleep and you're affecting this the next day, if you're in a stressful situation the next day and you don't handle the stress properly, you kill a bunch of cells, and now you don't have enough of the telomerase to build healthy replacement cells. And if this continues, you're just going to get sicker and sicker and older and more depressed and anxious. But you can reverse this at any moment. At any moment, as you bring your thoughts back into captivity, as you determine to use your mind more effectively. So by detoxing for 15 minutes a day, By building your brain for an hour a day, you are training yourself to be self-regulated. You're training yourself to be, you get to another level. You get so sharp, people will just turn around and say, like, I'll have what you're having. Because you are going to be different. You're going to be totally different because people are going to see you responding. Wisdom is the ability to recognize when you've made a mistake and say, I made a mistake, and learn something new. People respect that. It's the ability to recognize you don't know everything. Humility is a very strong characteristic of someone who's wise. And someone who's wise is someone who is constantly learning. And the more you learn, the more you realize you need to learn. And that creates this incredibly healthy pattern. And then we see from the research that your resilience increases in challenging situations. So you start coping better with the demands of life, which are there. Okay, so the other thing that we need to talk about in terms of, let's Mac, you can just go to the next slide. Okay, so here we see, it's not a black hole, but basically it's representing toxic thoughts. We took a bit of artistic license. But when you don't build your brain and you build up toxic waste, when you don't deal with your toxic thoughts and toxic trauma, you basically create abnormal trees. You still grow them, because you're still experiencing, and every time you experience, you grow stuff in your brain. But now the proteins fold incorrectly, so you have the incorrect electrical chemical balance, incorrectly folded proteins, incorrect chemical quantum energy. This affects the immune system. This sends out all kinds of weird signals through your body. And, this is cumulative. This is why we have to grab these, get them up, reconceptualize them, and keep moving on. And this is why I say this is a lifestyle. You see, if we continue this lifestyle, we set ourselves up for the dementias. We set ourselves up for dying younger. And if we add psychotropic drugs, which are antidepressants and so on, to this, we make it even worse. But let me talk about that tomorrow. Okay, I want to talk about mindsets now and the gift, and then I've just only touched the tip of the iceberg. But if I don't stop talking, you'll be here all night, because I can talk all night. Okay, so in the first part of this book, I have a concept called mindsets, which are vital to your mental self-care. Mindsets are basically attitudes. So Mac's going to bring up some slides for us now. And our mindset is an attitude, a state of mind. So if every thought that you build is the result of your thinking, feeling, and choosing. So with your mind, you build thoughts. You build them in two places. You build them in your non-physical, spiritual 99%, and you build them in the physical brain, the 1%, which is part of the 1%. So every memory or thought that you build has got a double representation. Okay? So basically every thought also contains information, and it contains the emotions, because you think and you feel and you choose. All of that is incorporated in a thought. And this is why when you remember something, you remember the information and you remember the emotions. Okay, so you feel the thought. And this is where in a trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not a disease, it is a phenomenon, it is a construct, it is a description of something very serious, but it's a mind issue, not a body illness. Okay, so I'm just stressing that. So as I said, tomorrow we'll go into some more depth. When someone remembers something, they could be 10 years after the incident, but there'll be a sudden sound and that'll trigger, or there'll be someone's face or something will trigger, and they'll re-experience that situation, and with all the pain that goes with it and all the emotions that go with it. Okay, so a mindset deals with every single thought that you have has its own mindset, or has a mindset, I should say, and it's either a healthy mindset or a toxic mindset. And there are 15 different mindsets. Okay? And there's more, and there's probably more, but this is what I've researched over the years and grouped them into these. And essentially, you either have them in this zone or that zone. So you either have a thinker mindset or you don't have a thinker mindset. You either have a controlled thoughts mindset or you don't have a controlled thoughts mindset. You either have a controlled emotions mindset or you don't have. So mindsets are like clothes that you wear. And mindsets are your perspective. So let's look at the next picture. And please do not be offended that I'm showing you this naughty picture in church. This is Prince William, okay? And this is a photograph that is taken at exactly the same time. And he isn't actually swearing. The bottom one is the correct photo, but it's two different perspectives. See? So your mindset will determine which perspective you're in. And if I was in a corporate environment, I would show my finger, but because I'm in a church, I won't. So I'll just let the picture do it for me. But this is the one finger, and this is the three fingers, okay? And that's what a mindset does. It determines your perspective for the day. How are you going to deal with, like last night we get this thing that that the flights are cancelled and there's all this rerouting, and I spend 70% of the month in planes, living in hotels. I hate flying. I mean, I don't mind flying. I'm not scared of it, but you get tired of it after a while. And when you've got to be rerouted in these extra hours, oh, let me tell you, I woke up this morning with a one-finger attitude. I thought, oh my gosh. I was expecting X flight, and now I've got Y flight. And it's going to be long and irritating and whatever. And I could feel every reaction in my body because I had now changed the environment of my body. And I had now gone toxic, and I was starting to feel that physically. And 1,400 neurophysiological responses started working against me, and I started killing some brain cells. So I decided I actually need my brain cells because I have to talk tonight. So I decided to shift my attitude. It took me a few moments and a bit of nudging from Mac to say, you know, teach you on mindsets today, and you've got a negative mindset. I said, I don't care. I feel like having a negative mind. I'm very irritated, and I had my little whine and moan. And I basically acknowledged and said, okay, I am thankful that I regret this. I mean, I'm thankful that I'm in this mood because now I can get out of it. See, there's a total different perspective there. So now I get into a better mood, okay? So let's have a look at a couple of examples of mindsets. So I'm going to choose the thinker mindset to start with. First, mindsets are like clothes that you wear. You put them on. So in the morning when I wake up, this takes me between 15 and 20 seconds to do, only because I'm extremely familiar with this now. It'll take you longer, and you'll see the way I've set out in the book. I explain the mindset, I give you some research, and then I give you activation tips. So you can take as long as you want to learn these mindsets, but I strongly urge you to learn them. We are building them into the app as well. So everything I teach is going to be built into the app, so it's really easy to use. Okay? So for the meantime, what I do is I wake up in the morning and I put on my mindset. As I said this morning, I put on a toxic version of it. But I changed it very quickly because my perspective was already being skewed. Everything started irritating me. Anyone had that experience? Just everything was now a bug. And until I changed it, and then as soon as I did, it wasn't so bad after all, okay? So a thinker mindset, the first thing I do in the morning when I wake up is I realize that my brain, I'm telling you what I know, and this is in the book, so I'm just going to tell it as though it's a story. So I know that my brain is 1%. I know my brain gets very tired. Your brain is limited in how much it can handle of your mind. This is why you need to sleep. One of the reasons. Your brain needs a rest. But not only does your brain need to rest at night, and we often don't even let it rest at night because we haven't dealt with our toxic thoughts, we haven't dealt with our traumas, we haven't built our brain. So most people are going to bed with toxic brains, and that's why they can't sleep very well. Add to that bad diet and medication, but those play a minor role in comparison to mind. I just released a blog and a podcast this week on the sleep stuff, okay, and the importance of getting your mind right before you sleep. Okay, so when I wake up in the morning, I know this about the brain. Now you do. So what do? Every hour I make sure that I have a thinker moment. And a thinker moment is where you just simply switch off to the external, switch on to the internal, and daydream. If it's for 1 second or 1 minute, it doesn't have to take you long. You can stare glassy-eyed at someone, and you can just zone out for a few seconds and zone in. And it enhances your intelligence, it gives your brain the necessary rest that it needs, and it enables your circuits of your brain to reconnect and just to reboot your brain. So important. In our technological age, we've forgotten how to do this. So they did a research study where they took people from the ages of 18 through 75. We should have this. Can you pull that slide up, the thinker slide? We've got this 11 studies done by the University of Virginia and Harvard. They took people 18 years to 77 years. And they put them in a room and they said, no cell phones, no iPads, nothing, just you, and you must think. Just sit on a chair and think. And 18 to 77 years, so this is not a teenager thing, okay? All of them, all age groups, hated it. They hated, and it was only 16 minutes. Just a few short years ago, this kind of study, many of these studies have been done, this was not an issue. With our technological age, we don't like thinking. We want to constantly be stimulated. We merge with our environments. If you're always on your phone, you merge with your phone. And it's an abnormal stimulation. You've got to control, and I've got a whole lot there about how to control. We know there's so much about controlling social media and so on. But it's good, but you do need to control it because it's exhausting to your brain. And sometimes you start feeling anxious, and you don't know what's going on. And if you don't control it, you may have not detoxed your brain. You may have not built your brain. brain, you may be eating badly, and you may also be just staring at your cell phone too much. And all of this combined can make you feel anxious. Now you go to the doctor, they tell you you've got bipolar depression because you're up and down, and now you must go on a medication. And the research conclusively shows that those medications do not help. They make your brain worse. I have numerous references in my work on that and in my books, and I work with top psychiatrists and scientists around the world on this. Lots of references there. And basically, even the top scientists at Harvard and psychiatrists at Harvard and all basically the Ivy Leagues all across the world don't even condone that the whole concept of chemical imbalance story. That's just... We're going to talk more about that tomorrow. But basically, the move now is that antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety meds, and stimulants actually don't help. They have more side effects than they do anything positive. The research has been very biased. When they say that they statistically do improve depression, they don't, because the studies are now being pulled apart, and there's a massive problem going on in the world of science called scientific bias, and eventually it will filter down to the average population, to the general population. But the point here is that they don't heal, they just numb the brain. So if you're constantly numbing the brain, you remove the brain's ability to ever rest. And an exhausted brain is going to be a depressed brain, and an anxious brain, and an overreactive brain, because your brain just can't handle it. So it's very important to have a thinker attitude, to develop a mindset where you are going to think, where you're going to control that social media, where you make a determined decision to... Part of my thinker moment in the morning is, I will detox for 15 minutes today. I will spend my 2 hours of my day building my brain. See, so it's a lifestyle. So that's why I always start with a thinker mindset. So put that on first. Then let me just give you one other one. Let's look at the forgiveness mindset, which is, we know we've got to forgive. There's all kinds of spiritual reasons, and there's all kinds of physical reasons, and I don't know if you've actually understood this or researched this in any way, but forgiveness is let me give you the scientific reason to forgive, and this is always the most convincing. Okay, so when you build a toxic thought as a result of someone hurting you, you go through someone bullies you, or someone sends you a terrible email, or someone says something to you, or whatever. So you've now received a toxic signal. You've thought, felt, and chosen. You've processed. You've spent time. You've built this into a long-term memory. You keep thinking about it 3 weeks later, 6 weeks later, 9 weeks later, maybe 9 years later, and you've got this very strong toxic experience. Whatever you think about the most will grow. Now, quantum physics explains our non-physical nature. It's considered the most accurate and fundamental of sciences. So in quantum physics, we see that there is no space-time dimension. In the physical, like the 1%, we know it's going to be tonight and tomorrow. I'm here and you there. So we understand space. I'm this tall, you that tall, etc. So the space-time dimension is very easy to understand in the physical. When we talk about the physical, what you can see, touch, hear, and feel. When we talk about the non-physical, we have to use things like quantum physics to help us understand. Now, quantum physics, as I've just mentioned, is the most accurate and fundamental of sciences. So it undergirds every bit of knowledge out there, okay? So it explains how we as humans work. It's a huge part of understanding the impact of our mind. So we use quantum physics to understand mind, and it's very good to understand forgiveness, because when in the quantum world, there is no space-time dimension. So if someone hurt you 10 years ago, the 99% of you doesn't recognize it's 10 years ago. It's now. It's alwaysness, okay? And also there's no separation. It's called entanglement, non-local action, okay? What that means is that you there and I'm here, I would have to get up and push you for you to fall over, okay? I have to physically make contact with you in the physical, but in the quantum, I'm impacting you with my photons that are coming out of my body, as Einstein did a lot of work on this. So there's a connection. We're not separated. You can take two quantum particles and you can separate them, but they're still connected. So if one spins this way, the other one spins that way. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. So things are connected. So in other words, if someone's hurt you, there's this invisible connection to that person in the quantum world. And there's no time and space. If you don't forgive and you keep thinking about it and the other person keeps thinking about it, and you haven't disconnected, you're just growing this inside of you. So when you forgive, you actually sever that. The minute you forgive, it changes the quantum energy and it disconnects. And now the process of healing can happen. Now you can cry, scream, shout. In other words, process, reconceptualize into something healthy. Where you've got the kintsugi principle, the gold pot. This happened to me, but I forgive. You disconnected. You have to do it to protect yourself. Otherwise, you're giving yourself brain damage. Okay, so in the morning, I know when I wake up, someone's going to say something to me. Maybe my kids, maybe my husband, maybe a family member, maybe someone from work, or maybe politics. Something's going to offend me, and I'm going to have to forgive. So I wake up in the morning knowing I'm going to forgive. That's a forgiveness mindset, and so on. Okay, so that's part of your mental health. Okay, I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'll never stop talking, but I hope that this has helped you to start seeing the importance of mind. And I totally encourage you to really get on board and join me as a community. I'm trying to build a community worldwide of people that are diving into this material, getting into the app, getting into these things and learning to self-regulate. In this way, we can really impact humanity for the better and make a change. It starts with us, and it just takes one person to make a difference. Thank you for listening.